I just got back from my debut headline tour around Australia, and it was interesting. If you've been watching the channel over the past couple of weeks, you would have seen me talk about this tour, why it was such a big deal. You might have seen a video of me, breaking down every single dollar that I spent on the tour, how much it cost and why it cost that much. Despite the fact that at times it genuinely felt like someone put a curse on this tour, these were by far the best shows that we have ever played. When things were going as planned and intended, it was by far the best that my band and I have ever sounded, looked, and played live. And I have no doubts about that, especially after reviewing all of the footage and the recordings that were captured both from our photographer Daniel and our front of house Chris. However, when things didn't go as planned, it was so severe that they could have genuinely cancelled and ruined the shows every single night. We somehow did get through all of that though, and I wanted to make this video as proof that even when you plan everything as best as you possibly can, in the world of live music, there is always something that can go wrong, even if none of them are your fault. We arrived in Brisbane to start the tour. We have a rehearsal day to set everything up, including our custom light show, just to make sure that everything is working. Very standard stuff. It's worth mentioning that Sixt Car Rentals didn't have a mover van waiting for us at the terminal, despite have it booked for like 2 months in advance. So shout out to them for ruining the whole morning. Thankfully that wasn't show day, so we had a little bit more time to get things underway. We get to the Airbnb, set everything up, which takes a couple hours, as you can see by the footage getting darker and darker throughout the day passing. Everything is running smooth, and I think it's the best time that we've ever practiced our set. I'm feeling very confident about the show at this point, which usually isn't the case, Usually I'm nervous for something going wrong out of our control. But, it just really felt like this last rehearsal day and the countless hours of planning, rehearsals, and foolproofing poured into the preparation of this tour. It just really felt like we had planned for every possible outcome. Fast forward to the next day. The next day is show day in Brisbane, first show of the tour, and we were playing at Black Bear Lodge right in the middle of the main Fortitude Valley Strip. I've already uploaded a mini movie / vlog of the entire tour, so make sure you guys go and subscribe and check that out to see a very candid and raw take of what a tour looks like behind the scenes and all that stuff. But long story short, we get there, we set up, we sound check, everything is running smoothly as expected, and people are starting to come through the door. The show starts, and it feels amazing. Being our first headline tour, it was weird to look around at a crowd where you could tell that 90% of the people there were genuinely there to support you. It felt different from supporting another band like we've only done in the past where, the crowd is obviously there to see the headliner. But now that we were the headliner, you can see the genuine excitement and smiles on people's faces, and I thought that was really cool. And from that, one thing I learned about myself in those first couple songs is that even in the quiet, arms crossed, like slightly headbangy crowd of prog fans, I do indeed feed off the crowd's energy a lot more than I thought I did. It made me more confident to move, more confident when speaking between songs and what I was saying, getting the crowd involved, cracking jokes. Everything was going as well as it possibly could be. But then, out of nowhere,
emergency. Emergency. Evacuate now.
Fire alarm gets set off in the venue. The show stops. People are being told to exit the show. And I, a typically less than average but still somewhat introverted instrumental prog artist, am being told by crew in my in-ears to defuse the situation with the crowd as soon as possible.
Okay, sorry guys, there is a fire alarm issue. Please stand by for a moment.
All the momentum stops. The show at this point is killed and dead. And this went on for about 5 to 6 minutes. That doesn't sound like a long time when I say it now, but when you're up on a stage with a house full of lights on you and the whole room of people just waiting for it to be over, it genuinely felt like an eternity. Usually I have an answer for everything, but I remember feeling very, very helpless at this point because it was pretty much completely out of our control. There was genuinely nothing that the band or I or crew could be doing to remedy the situation. The venue actually tried to pin it on us at first for our use of haze and, smoke and stuff, but they later owned up that it was them finding out that someone was smoking downstairs in the same building from a different establishment altogether. The venue eventually did cut power to the alarm and it stopped, but whatever they did ended up tripping the power of our entire rig. So everything just clicked off and we had to do a full power cycle on the rig as well. This also ties into another incident the next day in Sydney, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Some lighthearted stage banter and back and forth with the crowd passed the time, and thankfully everyone was very, very understanding. The whole situation was very interesting actually, you know, because for a moment in that room, we weren't a metal band touring around Australia. We were just a couple guys playing music to a bunch of other people in a room. And I think that genuine vulnerability and like camaraderie around the room ended up bringing the show back down to earth a little bit. And I might go as far to say that it actually resulted in both a more memorable and enjoyable experience for everyone watching and everyone involved. That is a theme that will keep happening in this video. The show eventually continues, we finish the set strong, and all is well. For any touring guys watching, it's also worth mentioning that we somehow had a disco loadout the second we finished our set, which was not communicated to us at all prior to the show from anyone. That wasn't ideal, but you know, despite that and the fire alarm incident, you know, it did feel like a great show and we were very happy with it at the end. The next day we're in Sydney at Bootleggers right in the heart of Newtown. Off the back of the last show's antics, we really wanted to make sure that everything in our rig was running smooth. So we set up as quickly as we possibly could and, jumped on stage to sound check a couple songs, make sure that the click and the MIDI and everything else was running smoothly. It ran exactly how I did at that first rehearsal, and again, everything felt great. We ran through like 6 songs in that soundcheck and we had the time to do it as well, which was awesome. Prior to that soundcheck, I was worried about everything that happened in Brisbane, thinking that maybe them tripping the power could have damaged the rig or something like that. But now that we had checked over everything with the redundancy included, I was feeling way more confident. The start of the show and even in the masterclass beforehand, Sydney felt different. Apologies to anyone from Sydney if you're watching this video, but amongst touring bands and artists in Australia, Sydney has had a little bit of a bad rap. Sydney has almost always had the reputation of being the city with like the least amount of engagement amongst the heavy scene. But my God, you guys have turned that around in the past year, 2 years. I personally started noticing this during the Monolith Festival in November 2024. And then again on the run that we did with Unprocessed in February of this year. The crowds over there just seem rowdier. The VIP sections and stuff seem really engaged as well. And nevertheless, that Sydney show ended up being probably the best show that we have ever played as a band. The Sydney crowd was incredibly engaged, moving around, yelling between songs, and even for an instrumental prog set, which was really awesome. But even with everything going so well, we got hit with another roadblock, and it's something that was seemingly 100% out of our control and something that is genuinely my biggest fear in playing live. As we were halfway through playing the song Arrhythmia, I heard this massive screech in my ears. It was like, it was so loud. And then it just went, I reckon it went for like just under a second. And then when that sound stopped, the click lagged and ended up landing completely out of time with us and the tracks, and everything was jumbled at front of house. The MIDI stopped working, the time-coded lights were now out of sync, and every member of the band was lost. The redundancy in our rig did indeed switch to the second laptop, but even that was still out of time. Thankfully, we found each other in our ears pretty quickly on stage, pretty much instantly, and we just kept playing to each other, ignoring the click and tracks, which was actually very hard to do in the moment. Chris, our front of house engineer, must have clocked this too, so he was very quick to turn off the click in our ears, as he has control of that from front of house. By using a program called AbleSet with Ableton. And from then we continued the rest of the song raw and just started playing to Steven, our drummer. But the tracks still ended up coming out like an 1/8 faster than they should have been or something like that. It was a bit off. Thankfully, it wasn't too noticeable and it was towards the second half of the song. We just got through the song and still played the exact same way that we would have, albeit with a little tap dancing on the quads since, the MIDI stopped working. This also provided for an interesting improv lead over the solo section with the MIDI pitch shifting not working as well. My head in this moment was so fried. Part of it was like, really? Seriously? Like this has to happen right now, again, really? But the other part was just brainstorming and just trying to problem solve, what we're going to do once this song is over. Quick side note, this is why you practice not until you can play the song right, but you practice until you can't play it wrong. If muscle memory wasn't able to take over while I was thinking about something else in that moment, it would have been a disaster. I wouldn't have been able to play the song while I was trying to fix it. I already knew that we would need to take a moment to stop the show and fix whatever was happening. In the moment, I was really pissed off, actually. Like, it just had no reason to happen. And I just kind of like, I was mad, dude. Like, I won't lie, I was mad inside. I was very, very mad because we did all the precautions. We tested the redundancy in soundcheck, and I couldn't help but think back to the fire alarm incident and the venue switching the breakers on and off that kept tripping our entire rig. So right now, I am testing the playback out at home just to make sure that our play audio interface isn't doing anything that it's not supposed to, in hopes that this was a 1 in a million and not a faulty unit now. So far, nothing has come up, but we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. But what happened next set a massive precedent for the rest of the show and the rest of the tour, actually.
This is a good learning opportunity because I figure that everyone here is at least somewhat of a nerdy instrumentalist. Am I correct? Yes! And we can get on to playing the show that we've worked so hard to play for you guys. Does that sound fucking good?
We finished the song, tracks have stopped, and the room has fallen silent over, the cheers of the song ending. I immediately jump onto the microphone and just start explaining everything that's happening, both in a way of engaging the crowd, but also slyly explaining to our front of house, Chris, over the PA, what was happening. And, I had him in my ears asking, what's going on? And this was my way of like subtly telling him while also making it a crowd engagement moment. The beauty of playing, nerdy music and having a background of YouTube videos going through extremely niche modern metal guitar and live prep and all that stuff is that I'm sure 99% of the people who come to our shows are probably guitarists or musicians themselves. The golden rule in situations like this is to just turn it off and turn it on again. So as Chris and Brad were now doing a full power cycle on the entire live read, including quad cortexes and everything else, I used that as an opportunity to basically explain what was going on, as I knew that our crowd would be really interested in hearing that while it's happening in real time. And for that, I am very, very grateful, and I was very, very grateful in that moment. Because if we were just a standard band, standard metalcore band, whatever, no one would give a about what I was saying in that moment. So if you were at that show, I appreciate you and your nerdiness. I really, really do. The incident was just as long as the fire alarm incident, but it didn't feel anywhere near as long, thankfully. As things were booting back up, I used it as an opportunity to talk about the fire alarm situation that happened the night before and how it just, this was all happening. Cracking some jokes with the crowd, getting Keyan on the mic as well to say his piece. We were passing out guitars, we were passing out basses out to the people in the front row. People were having a play. The room was full of laughter. And again, in what should have been a moment of utter catastrophe, I feel so weirdly optimistic about it now, because seeing the footage and seeing how much everyone seemed to enjoy this candid moment within the set, again, it's now at the point where I genuinely think that the show would not have been as good without that unfortunate incident happening. We got back on track, everything was running, and the switch was well and truly switched on. Again, I probably wouldn't have had as much adrenaline or been so confident on the mic or moved around as much on stage if that whole incident didn't happen. Because if it didn't happen, we would still all have something to lose. But with the entire rig dying and needing to be restarted and having this whole moment, we now had nothing to lose. We played out of our skin that night, and I should have walked away from that show feeling devastated, but I was absolutely over the moon. And Sydney was just incredible. I am so grateful for their participation in our unfortunate circumstance that night. If anyone that was at that Sydney show or any of the other shows are watching this video, leave a comment telling me what night you guys came to and what you thought about the show. The next and final day, Melbourne. We were playing Bergie Band Room in Brunswick. Small venue, but definitely the best sounding out of all the cities that we played. That venue sounds phenomenal, especially for a room that size. At this point in the tour, I was happy. The Sydney show, despite its flaws, was absolutely insane. Merch was going really well as well, which, by the way, all the very last pieces of merch are available on the web store with worldwide shipping right now. I'm telling you, there's like less than 10 left for some of these shirts, so be quick. Check it out now before they're all gone. But yeah, feeling good. What else could go wrong? The airline didn't put my guitars on the plane. We are now stuck at Melbourne airport with the other 26 pieces of luggage and gear, waiting for the 27th final and most important piece, my Anki with my guitars in it. We were told that it was going to come on another plane. We weren't told which plane or what time exactly because, the airline just couldn't give us that information for whatever reason, but they assured us that they would eventually get here within the next couple hours. So they gave us two options. Either we leave and they deliver the guitars to us at the venue later, or we wait around for a plane to arrive with my Anki full of guitars. At this point, it's 2 p.m. We're already eating into the early venue load-in and soundcheck time that we have paid for, by the way. But I think I actually would have rather my hands and clapped than relied on Virgin Australia to get me my guitars from the Melbourne airport to the venue. So we basically had no choice but to wait. At this point, I've posted a joke story, but bands and you guys were messaging me asking if I needed to borrow guitars for the show. I really appreciate everyone who offered. Thank you guys so much for looking out for me on what was already a very stressful run. Long story short, we waited, the guitars eventually came, and we just beelined it to the venue. That was the quickest setup and sound check that we've ever done, and thankfully it was on the last day, so we had a bit of a rhythm going at this point. We finished sound check and it comes to the show. Everything is going super well. We did all of our pre-show rituals that we usually do, getting our stage clothes ready, chilling out backstage all together before we jump on, changing the batteries in our wireless packs. The show starts and it feels great. We're halfway through the song White. This song seems to have a curse on it because the fire alarm happened during this song in Brisbane as well. I even have a video on the channel from the first show that we ever played where my drummer Steven's drumstick gets wedged on the inside of a splash cymbal during this song and gets stuck. We're playing through the song, feeling good, and then out of nowhere, my guitar just cuts out. I look down at my quad. I'm seeing no input coming in from my guitar on the quad. Well, that makes it easy. It's either my guitar or the wireless system. I look at my wireless unit. There's a little battery symbol on there, which means that my guitar wireless pack is charged, working, and connected to the receiver, but no signal going into my quad. I'm playing this song while trying to fit all of this stuff at once in my brain and thinking, did my guitar just die? Did the solder melt off inside of the input jack? Why am I getting no input out of this guitar? Everything is working, everything is turned on, everything is connected. Why is there no signal passing through even though it's all working? I still have no idea what happened, which is frustrating because it just makes me think that, again, it just had no reason to happen at all. We took a moment before jumping into the next song to switch to a normal wired connection straight into my quad. I always have a guitar lead right next to my pedal board on stage just in case something exactly like this happens. Again, explaining to the crowd, what was going on in the midst of me, checking the board and making sure they were all good to go. Keyan, my bass player, had the initiative to diffuse the situation by getting someone up on stage to play his dingwall. Shout out to Nick for being such a good sport and not having any nerves to come up on stage in front of everyone. Actually ended up jamming on stage to give everyone a hint of what the next song would be. I was kind of telling him, hey, play this chord, play this chord, play this chord. And we were just jamming together, and that was a really cool moment. Everything's back on track, we're up and running, and the show goes on. Again, at this point, it was much of the same feeling and emotions as every other night, but they were elevated even more since this was the last show on the entire run. With half the set still to go, we gave it everything. Now with the experiences of the past 2 shows, we were not phased at all. We knew that even if the worst thing happened, we would find a way out of it and still keep the show going, and I was very, very proud of everyone that was involved. Not only in just this moment in particular, but across the whole run. We ran a very tight ship, and that to me is, you can't buy that experience. Do you know what I mean? That only comes from working with the same group of individuals for so long, and you know exactly what each other's thinking, you know how to work around things, you know how to fix things, and again, that is just priceless, especially in moments like these. Despite all of the unfortunate, seemingly unavoidable situations that happened throughout the tour, Stuff like this, you know, isn't news. It happened to us in some way before. Maybe not the fire alarm, but the fact that we got through everything goes to show that even with all the planning in the world, nothing can truly prepare you for when things are live and in the moment. And this is especially the case for live music. I was already aware of this, but now after this tour, I've experienced and learned that, you know, being a decent musician has absolutely nothing to do with being a good and entertaining live act. And it's what you do in these moments that can truly make or break a show. And in this case, when it's this severe, with all the implications that happen and all the context from the other videos that I mentioned at the start of this video, it could have genuinely ruined my career. But talking to the crowd, getting them in behind the scenes, passing guitars around, getting people up on stage, it pulled the curtain back. It revealed what was actually happening on that stage in that room. It flipped the dynamic where now everyone is on the same level as each other. We weren't professional musicians touring. We were just a couple guys who really wanted to share our music with everyone in the room. And in a music climate where so much of the behind the scenes are shown compared to even just 10 years ago, within a digital age with smartphones and social media where I think people are craving a human connection experience, these moments really made the shows a lot more memorable and gave that human experience. And again, as ridiculous as it may sound, I have no doubt that these shows wouldn't have been half as impactful or enjoyable if those incidents didn't happen. So anyone who watched that cost breakdown video and asked why I would spend the extra money on bringing a photographer, even though he saved us money, but let's ignore that. Well, now I can say that Daniel, our photographer, was worth his weight in gold. Because of him, we now have literal 4K HDR footage of us being handled the absolute worst hand of unforeseen circumstances for multiple live shows in a row. And now when in the future booking agents and promoters want to see footage of our shows and how we handle ourselves, this video will serve as the perfect time capsule, a complete retelling of us handling it very comfortably. Subscribe so you don't miss other videos about this tour. Peace.